Right now, we'd like to welcome a very special guest to the WTMA Morning Show, the Morning Buzz. He's a former Republican congressman from New York, Joe DioGuardi. Did I pronounce that right, Joe?
You did. Good morning.
Good morning. You're on with yours truly and Sherry Bernardi. I didn't realize they had Republicans in New York. I thought that was straight Democrats and liberals all the way.
Let me tell you, not an easy place for a fiscal conservative, and you may recall that I did run for the U.S. Senate last year, won all the primaries, but when the primary ends at September 15th and you got like 6 weeks to go, very difficult to raise the millions you need to overcome the vast majority of Democrat registrations in the state. But, hey, I brought a message. We've got a credit card mentality. I'm a CPA. Not many certified public accountants in the U.S. Congress, I can assure you. But what's the bottom line? We're spending money we don't have, we're borrowing from countries we don't trust, and we're putting the American dream in jeopardy. That's what it's all about as far as I'm concerned.
You know, Congressman, I was glad to hear you use the word, the phrase credit card mentality, because I think if people grasp that, then they have an idea of how this country's been operating and how we can't go much longer operating that way.
Absolutely, Sherry. You know what I did when I was a congressman to make the point? I took my plastic voting card, the same size as any credit card you carry, and I said, you know what this is? This is the most expensive credit card in the world, because every time we put it into the computer terminal at the end of the row of seats in the House of Representatives, we're raising the national debt. And basically, there's no limit because we keep raising the debt ceiling.
And we can also print our own funds where...
That's the other side of it. Got the Fed now, here's Ron Paul is trying to audit the Fed. We don't even know what the size of the Fed balance sheet is. And that could be a big danger because while we do need to keep interest rates low to get out of the potential for a worse recession, we got to be careful that, inflation could come back. Remember Jimmy Carter? We had a 21% prime rate because of stagflation. What's that? A stagnant economy, which we have right now, and, a lot of inflation. So the Fed's got a big problem because we're in uncharted waters. They don't know when to release that quantitative easing, and some are saying we need more right now because we still don't see ourselves coming out of this funk that we're in, especially in housing.
And every time they print more money, isn't that, in effect, they're stealing from all of us because our money becomes worth paper? Exactly.
If we don't get the economy to grow, the only way out of this is to get the economy to grow, and that's why at this point we've got to give the benefit of the doubt to what the Fed is doing, because if we didn't keep the interest rates low, there's going to be no hope of getting this housing market turned around or the economy to go back to where it should be, which is about 3%. Right now we're projecting for the year 2012 a 2.2%. That's rather anemic. That's not going to do it.
All right, we're talking to Joe DioGuardi, a former New York congressman. How long were you in the Congress there, Joe?
I was there 4 years. Not easy to do in New York State, but I was and got a lot of experience. So I came out of the private sector, 22 years in what was then the world's largest accounting firm, and then 4 years in the public sector. I wrote a book, Unaccountable Congress, It Doesn't Add Up, saying that we've got too much off the books in the United States of America so that the numbers you're getting are not the whole story. For instance,
I've heard that.
Keep talking about is about $15 trillion when you consider what the public holds and what's in the Social Security trust funds. But that doesn't include what we owe on Social Security, Medicare, all these government-sponsored enterprises that the government guarantees. You may be talking about another $50 trillion in debt, which would mean the debt would not be just about 100% of gross domestic product, which it is right now at $15 trillion. It would be maybe 4 times that. And we're worried about Greece and Portugal, which are only like 200% of GDP. So we've got to start looking at the real numbers, and that's why I stayed in the game, and I'm writing, and I'm on your show. I represent a group of bipartisan congressmen in a coalition for a fiscally sound America, and that's why I'm on your show right now, because we're trying to get this message out around the country that, things are not as good as we'd like them to be, and we got to start thinking big to bend this debt curve down. It's not bending down yet. It's going up.
So what do we need to do?
Well, number one, as I said, we need to have policies that promote growth. And what we're hearing in the elections right now are a lot of negatives, and we don't see any real path to that growth. Tax reform, I think, is going to be very important. There's no doubt in my mind that the tax code that we have now is not fair. It's not distributing the tax burden fairly across all Americans. And I think when you look at the over $1 trillion that we have in so-called deductions, which many call loopholes, I think we've got to start getting rid of most of them so that we can, broaden the base and maybe bring down the tax rate overall. And there are other things that we've got to do as well, because housing, I would not eliminate the interest deduction on your mortgage, because that obviously would be a bad public policy. So we've got to have tax reform without a doubt. I think we need budget reform. Budget reform in order to understand what we're really spending, because I think we're doing too much off the books, whether it's the Fed on monetary policy or whether it's the Congress on what we would call the deficit and that tax and spend policy, the budget policy.
You were talking about tax reform, Congressman. What about the fair tax? Have you guys in your group considered that?
Well, I would like to first deal with the code the way it is right now and make that fair. I think that's where we have to go right now. But anything that gets the rates down and broadens the base is where we have to go. I would not specifically jump on a fair tax until I saw that we were able to deal with the current Internal Revenue Code. You don't want to have two systems going at the same time, because then you'll see taxes go up on both. When you said, what kind of reforms we're talking about, the group, the Coalition for Fiscally Sound America, believes, as I do, that going big means to go back and look at that Simpson-Bowles recommendation. Don't forget, Obama appointed a very good Democrat, Erskine Bowles, and a very good Republican, Alan Simpson, and they came up with what I call a bipartisan, fair way of looking at everything. And they said we needed a minimum of changes that would reduce the debt in the next 10 years by at least $4 trillion. We're nowhere near that. What we're talking about this year is maybe over the next few years, if you look at current policy, to reduce it by $1.2 trillion. That is not enough. But why didn't the president make that commission mandatory? If you recall, back when I was a congressman, we had the base closing commission, military bases. Well, it was made mandatory, so we couldn't play politics with it. This wasn't done that way. So they made the recommendations, and then it was put on the shelf. So we are trying to get that off the shelf, this group that represents the Coalition for Fiscally Sound America of former congressmen, Republican and Democrat, to save America. We don't want to see this country go broke as China, with its plan, is going up, we're going down. I mean, our debt to China alone is like $2 trillion right now.
What is America's future if we continue on this path? Because a lot of folks just either don't believe it or have unrealistic expectations of, we're the United States of America. Nothing that bad can happen here.
We are at risk. There is no doubt about it that we are right now an unsustainable nation fiscally. You can't have the kind of debt that we have and think that we're going to work our way back to a very sound number one economy. Right now, China has passed Japan. China has a plan, and their 10-year plan will put them by us in 10 years if we don't wake up. We are the beacon to the world as a morally based country. We don't want to cede that spot to a country that doesn't share our values. China is, coming out of the dark right now, and God bless them. They're putting people to work. They're trying to generate an internal economy, but they are not the one country that I would trust with world policy, and you can see all the problems we've got around the world right now. So we need to stay economically strong. We need to go big on reducing the deficit. All spending has to be put on the table. I believe in the pay-as-you-go. If you're going to, raise spending somewhere, you got to cut something else. Or raise taxes. I hate to even use that word, but we got to put everything on the table. Otherwise, we're putting this great nation in jeopardy. And the key word in the next 10 years is going to be unsustainability from a fiscal point of view.
Isn't it true that if people do not sign on to doing the hard work now, that there will be nothing for anyone later on?
There's no question that we have spent the last 10 to 20 years, think about it. we have spent money we don't have and built up a national debt that at the end of this last fiscal year, which was September 30th, 2011, was just over $15 trillion. That's with a T. That is approximately 100% of the gross domestic product of the United States of America. What's gross domestic product? That's the sum total of all economic activity. So we're at 100% already. We've done that. So what we did is we created a false economy. That's what led to the bubble. That's what led to this lousy economy that we have in housing. We let people spend money they didn't have. Worse than that, we gave people mortgages that they couldn't afford to pay. Some of them had no jobs. We're now going back and we're seeing that we let people game us. When people think about their households, there's only so far you can go with spending money you don't have before you hit your own debt ceiling. And many people are at the point where their minimums are just the interest on that credit card. Mm-hmm. They can't demonstrate to a bank that they deserve a better credit line.
Yeah.
And yet we just keep raising our debt ceiling. That's why so many of us are frustrated when that bill comes up, as it does very frequently. We're not paying enough attention to the fact that we're giving money to the government, and the government, is an entity that likes to spend. Let's face it, politicians control the books. I wish I could tell you that we had independent auditors. We don't. So you have government accountants who are paid by politicians directly and indirectly, and then you've got the politicians controlling the books. So you never really know the right answers.